Welcome back, and hello if you're new. Earlier this year, Between the Buried and Me announced that their brand new album Automata would be released in 2 separate parts throughout 2018. Previously I took a look at Automata Part 1 and absolutely loved it. Combining the classic tropes of mid-2000s Between the Buried and Me, as well as a kind of new minimalist approach, it really spoke to the classic element of Between the Buried and Me. Leaving us on the cliffhanger that was Blot, we now delve into Automata Part 2, and this is where Between the Buried and Me boldly go where no one else would dare go. Whereas Automata Part 1 tackled more of a refined approach in terms of both melody and this kind of aggressive nature that Between the Buried and Me have had, Automata Part 2 is very much down the rabbit hole. Kicking off with the proverbial bellow, this is potentially the most expansive level of prog that Between the Buried and Me have brought to the table to date. The proverbial bellow is a 13-minute odyssey into everything that is, was and will be Between the Buried and Me. And there's all sorts of kind of interplay going on with each of the instruments, and you could argue that there are some sections of Nova Collective, which is Dan Briggs's other side project, which have slowly kind of seeped their way into it. The opening 3-minute instrumental reminds me very much of The Great Misdirect. It's probably the most technical that we've heard thus far in Automata. Similarly, Tommy's vocals are very, very much Floydian and kind of lose you in this idea of, you know, this adventure. We then go into Glide, which is kind of it's a 2-minute interlude which features an accordion. And then we go into Voice of Trespass, which is arguably probably one of the most comprehensive elements of Between the Buried and Me's kind of wacky side to date. You know, they've always had these different sounds where, you know, in Colours it was a hoedown. In Parallax 2 there was that sort of surf rock bit. And I feel that they really wrote a song based around this idea of being quite zany rather than using it as somewhat of an extra. And it, you know, Voice of Trespass has got this grooving ballroom style to it with trumpets and a kind of guitar riff where it's like, and there's even a section where all the instruments individually drop out. And Tommy's got this sort of scat style, like, and then it goes into a bass solo, and then afterwards a small clean guitar solo in that jazz sort of style. But my favourite part of that section is when Blake has his drum solo, and after he's finished it you hear this 1, 2, 3, and it just kind of makes it all feel very real and very live. However, Automata Part 2 isn't just prog bombast. There are some of the best melodies I've heard since Colours on this record. For example, in the proverbial bellow midway through the song, there's a section where Tommy's basically just saying, please pick up the phone, and together, the way that the band have put this all together, including the atmosphere that comes before it and after it, has got that quintessential Between the Buried and Me sound, and it's so emotive, and that I feel that that's only something that Between the Buried and Me can do. And for the old school fans, there are elements from Between the Buried and Me's old school catalogue which peek out in different sections throughout Automata Part 2. The proverbial bellow, for example, is very kind of Alaska, the Great Misdirect style era. There's a real sense of Parallax 2 in Voice of Trespass's main section, but it's got that real frenetic kind of metallic sound to it. Speaking of which, that brings me to those fuck yeah moments, which Voice of Trespass has got an absolutely massive one. And it reminded me of, in a weird way, Dream Theater's Pull Me Under, but obviously because I can't show any of the music that's been released at the moment, I just thought I'd give you some examples from their previous catalogue. So for example, that riff in Coma Ecliptic. Drenched in the summer Act 2. And you know, the classic riff in colours on White Wall. And as ever, Between the Buried and Me know fantastically how to tell a story, and the kind of denouement that always happens within a Between the Buried and Me song, either in the penultimate or the final track, is really present on the grid and has this kind of real sense of resolve, which ends on this almost Desert of Song style acoustic guitar with this massive Guns N' Roses futuristic style solo. The Proverbial Bellow also features a fantastic solo from Paul Wagner, which is somewhat different to his normal style and has a bit more of a hard rock tinge to it, rather than, you know, this ultra technical sweeping that he used to do in the band's earlier career. And as I mentioned previously, in the grid, you know, the key changes to something of a major key to really enhance that sense of, you know, we're coming to the end of the story now. The production was spot on Automata Part 2, and there's so much going on at some points, which it was incredibly important for the production to be good, because otherwise, you know, you feel that all of these great ideas they've got would be totally lost. And it also sits perfectly, you know, in the transitional phase from Automata 1 to Automata 2, which, you know, left me a bit kind of like, oh, I'm missing that prog element. So it's almost like this Jekyll and Hyde persona that Between the Buried and Me have got with Automata 1 and 2. The transition on the final section of Blot hangs perfectly with the introduction of the Proverbial Bellow. In terms of negatives, this is a Between the Buried and Me album. There really is no negatives. They've done so well in incorporating both in Automata 1, but also having Automata 2 as its own individual standing piece. The artwork I really enjoyed. I feel like the purples and the greens in the tones overall kind of has a darker quality to it, but also somewhat more of a sideshow-esque element to it. It's a fantastic representation of all that Between the Buried and Me have come to stand for. So for that reason, I'm giving the record a 5 out of 5. Between the Buried and Me's brand new album, Automata Part 2, is set for a July 13th release via Sumerian, and you can pick up a copy right underneath me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button. Also make sure to turn on the notification bell so that you can see when I upload videos. Let me know what you guys thought of Automata 1. I can't wait to see what everyone thinks of this when it's all released and everyone can listen to everything all together. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next week for another brand new review. Alright, take care guys.